Now let's get to our top story. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell says that the U.S. economy is in a favorable place, but is facing significant risks. The Fed chair made the comments at the annual Jackson Hole Symposium. Powell's first public comments since the Fed cut interest rates on July 31st for the first time in more than 10 years. President Trump took to Twitter saying that the Fed did nothing and that the U.S. has a very strong dollar and a very weak Fed. He concluded his tweet by asking, who is our bigger enemy, Jay Powell or Chairman Xi? Let's get right out to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Yahoo Finance's Brian Cheung is standing by. Wow, what a tweet from the president on this day of lots of news from China. Jay Powell's much anticipated speech. How did that tweet land out there, Brian?
Yeah, well, it's a brisk and balmy morning here in Jackson Hole, but it seems like it's heating up a little bit with the tweets coming from President Trump shortly after Fed Chair Jay Powell delivered his first remarks, as you mentioned, Jen, the first time that he's spoken publicly since the Fed decided to lower rates by 25 basis points in its July 31st meeting. Clearly, that move did not quell the fears that President Trump has about perhaps a coming recession, and the tweets that you see this morning are reflecting his concerns about it and maybe trying to shift some of the blame onto the Federal Reserve, asking what really is the bigger enemy here? Is it China or is it the Federal Reserve, specifically Fed Chair Jay Powell? I do want to note that he did mention a number of things in his speech. It was over 11 pages long, but none of it actually mentioned anything about Fed independence. We've heard Jay Powell say in the past that the Fed is independent. It's committed to pursuing its monetary policy goals of stable prices and also maximum employment, saying that he pays no mind to what the president is doing, and that if President Trump were to call him, asking him to resign, that Chairman Powell wouldn't do that. So interesting to see, though, that he chose not to discuss that in today's speech, and it does kind of reflect that Chairman Powell has had to pick his battles in terms of what he does and does not respond to from the president. But now that the president is equating the trade issue that he started with the risk from monetary policy, it does remain to be seen about how the Fed will react to the trade issues. I do want to flag that President Trump did say via tweet that it'll be interesting to see how the Fed reacts to an announcement that will be coming shortly. Unsure about exactly what that announcement may be, although maybe it hints at more tariffs. But for what it's worth, Chairman Powell did say that tariffs are something that the Fed is modeling and considering in its considerations for monetary policy going forward, but said it's a really difficult thing to model because it's so unprecedented. A trade war of this caliber has never tried to been modeled in the Fed's economic decision-making before. So that is a challenge that everyone is paying attention to as the Fed gets closer to its next policy setting meeting. That is September 18. For what it's worth, Fed funds futures markets and the market participants at large are pricing in a 100% chance of at least 25 basis points of cuts in that meeting.